I should have died that night. That's the first thought that comes back to me whenever it rains this hard. Whenever the streetlights blur into gold smears across wet pavement and the air smells like cold metal and something I can't name, something close to fear. It was just after midnight, 12:17 a.m. according to the cracked screen of my phone, and I remember thinking how quiet the city felt for once, like it was holding its breath. My shift had run late again. Another double at the diner off 8th. My feet aching inside cheap sneakers that had long since lost their support. My hands still smelling faintly like coffee and dish soap no matter how many times I washed them. I should have called a ride. I should have stayed inside until the storm passed. But I didn't. I told myself it was only a 10-minute walk to my apartment, 8 blocks, nothing I hadn't done 100 times before. The rain started halfway down the second block, not gentle, not soft, but sudden and heavy, like someone flipped a switch in the sky. Within seconds, I was soaked through, my hoodie clinging to my skin, my hair sticking to my face as I pulled it back with shaking fingers. My phone buzzed once in my hand, then went dark. Dead. Of course it was. I let out a small laugh that didn't sound like mine and kept walking, faster now, my footsteps echoing too loud against the empty sidewalk. That's when I heard it. Not behind me exactly, not close, but there. Another set of footsteps. Slow. Measured. I told myself it was nothing. Just someone else trying to get out of the rain. Just the city being the city. But something in my chest tightened anyway. Something instinctive. Something that made me turn left a block too early, into a narrow side street I rarely used. The kind with flickering lights and closed storefronts and shadows that stretched too long across the ground. The kind you don't notice during the day. The kind you regret at night. I realized my mistake 3 steps in. Too quiet. Too empty. The sound of my own breathing suddenly too loud in my ears. I stopped. Just for a second. Just long enough to hear the footsteps again. Closer this time. I turned, my heart slamming hard against my ribs, scanning the entrance to the street where the yellow glow of the main road barely reached. Hello. My voice came out thin, almost swallowed by the rain. No answer. Just the steady rhythm of water hitting concrete. I told myself to keep moving. Just walk. Don't run. Running makes it worse. Running makes it real. But my body didn't listen. I took a step back instead, then another, my eyes adjusting to the dark just enough to see shapes shifting where there should have been nothing. That's when I understood. This wasn't random. This wasn't bad luck. I hadn't walked into this by accident. I'd been led here. And somewhere between one breath and the next, I knew something else too. This night wasn't over. It was just beginning. I should have run. That thought hit me a second too late. Right as the shadows at the end of the alley shifted into something solid, something human, something very real. My breath caught in my throat, sharp and sudden, and I felt it then, that cold awareness sliding down my spine like ice water. I was not alone. You are lost, a voice said, low and almost amused, the words cutting clean through the rain. I turned fully this time, my back brushing against the damp brick wall behind me, my fingers curling into the fabric of my sleeve as if that could anchor me, as if that could make me smaller. 3 figures stepped forward, their shapes sharpening as they moved under the flickering light above the alley. Not rushing, not loud, just certain. That was the worst part. The certainty. My mind scrambled for something to say, something normal, something that could undo whatever this was turning into. I took a wrong turn, I said, forcing the words out even as my voice trembled. I'm just trying to get home. One of them let out a quiet laugh that did not reach his eyes. This is not your street, he replied, and the way he said it made it sound like I had crossed into something that was never meant for me. My heart started pounding harder, each beat louder than the rain, louder than my own thoughts. I glanced past them, searching for an opening, for any gap that could lead back to the main road, to light, to people, to safety. There was none. Another step closer. The space between us shrinking inch by inch. I tried to move along the wall, to slide sideways without making it obvious, but my foot caught on uneven pavement, and I stumbled just enough to give away everything. Fear, panic, weakness. Their attention sharpened instantly. Hey, one of them said, softer now, almost reassuring, which somehow made it worse. No need to be nervous. My pulse spiked so fast it made me dizzy. Every instinct I had ever learned, every warning I had ever ignored, all of it screamed at once. Leave. Now. But my legs would not listen. My body felt locked in place, trapped between the wall at my back and the presence closing in front of me. Please, I managed, barely louder than a whisper, hating how small I sounded. I do not want any trouble. Another step, then another. Close enough now that I could see the outline of a hand lifting slightly, not touching, not yet, but enough to make my breath hitch again. And then everything stopped. Not gradually, not naturally, just stopped. The rain was still falling, but the air shifted, heavy and sudden, like pressure before a storm breaks. The men in front of me went still in a way that did not make sense, their focus snapping past me, over my shoulder, toward the darkness behind. I felt it before I heard it. That presence. Different. Controlled. The kind of silence that does not ask for attention, but takes it anyway. A single set of footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing against the pavement with a rhythm that felt measured, intentional, final. I did not turn right away. I could not. Something in me already knew that whatever stood behind me was not just another stranger in the rain. And when the voice came, low and steady and impossible to ignore, it did not sound loud. It did not need to. Step away from her. The words were simple, calm, but they carried something underneath them that shifted everything in an instant. The men in front of me hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, and that was all it took for me to realize something had changed. Completely. Irreversibly. And somehow, without even seeing him yet, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The worst part of my night had just ended, and something far more dangerous had just begun. I did not breathe. Not when the voice cut through the alley. Not when the men in front of me stiffened like something unseen had just stepped into their world. I felt it instead, a shift so subtle it should have been nothing, and yet everything inside me reacted to it like instinct. Slowly, carefully, I turned. He was already there. I do not know how long he had been standing behind me. 1 second there was nothing but rain and shadow, and the next he existed like he had always been part of the night itself. Tall, still, dressed in dark layers that blended into the storm, but nothing about him felt hidden. If anything, he felt impossible to ignore. The dim light caught the edge of his face, sharp lines, controlled expression, eyes that did not rush, did not search, just settled on the scene in front of him like he already understood it. He did not look at me first. That was what stayed with me. He looked at them. The 3 men who, moments ago, had seemed so certain. I said step away. He repeated, the same calm tone, but now there was something beneath it, something that made the air feel heavier, harder to breathe. No one moved right away. The rain filled the silence, hitting pavement, dripping from the edges of buildings, the only sound in a moment that felt stretched too thin. Then one of them shifted his weight, just slightly, like he was about to say something, about to challenge it, about to pretend this was still his space. He did not get the chance. The man behind me took 1 step forward. That was all. Just 1 step. And something invisible broke. I saw it in the way their shoulders tightened, in the way their confidence slipped without a word being spoken. They stepped back. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just enough to create space. Enough to acknowledge something they did not want to admit out loud. My pulse was still racing, but now it mixed with something else. Confusion. Relief. Fear that had not gone away, only changed direction. I did not understand what I was looking at, but I understood one thing. He was the reason they were leaving. And they were leaving. One by one, they retreated toward the mouth of the alley, their eyes never fully turning away from him, like they were measuring distance, calculating risk, deciding that whatever this was, it was not worth it. Within seconds, they were gone. Just like that. The space emptied, the tension snapping loose so suddenly it made my knees feel weak. I realized I was still pressed against the wall, still holding my breath, still frozen in the exact position I had been in before everything changed. The man did not follow them. He did not watch them go. His attention shifted then, finally, landing on me. And that was worse. Up close, the control in his expression was sharper, more defined. Not cold exactly. Not cruel. Just precise. Like every movement, every word, every decision had already been considered before it happened. I swallowed, my throat dry despite the rain, my fingers tightening around my sleeve as if that could ground me. Thank you, I said, the words coming out quieter than I intended, but they were the only ones I had. He did not respond immediately. His gaze moved over me. Quick, assessing, not lingering anywhere inappropriate, just noticing. The soaked hoodie, the shaking hands, the way I was still standing too close to the wall like I expected it to protect me. "You should not be here," he said finally, his voice lower now, less directed at others, more measured. I let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh, except it was not funny. "I figured that out," I replied, trying to steady my voice, trying to sound like myself again, even though I was not sure who that was anymore in this moment. Another second passed. Then he did something unexpected. He stepped closer, not enough to crowd me, just enough to close the distance that had separated us. Close enough that I could see the faint lines at the corner of his eyes, the detail and the color, the calm that did not match the situation at all. "Are you hurt?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. Not what I expected. Not from someone like him. I shook my head quickly. "No, I am fine." It was not entirely true, but it was close enough. His gaze held mine for a fraction longer, like he was deciding whether to believe me, whether to accept that answer or push further. Then he gave a small nod, almost to himself. "Good," he said. Just one word. Simple. Controlled. Final. But something about the way he said it made it sound like a decision had already been made. Not by me. By him. And for reasons I could not explain, that realization sent a different kind of chill through me, one that had nothing to do with the rain. The rain did not stop. It kept falling like nothing had happened, like the world had not just shifted in the span of a few seconds, like I had not gone from trapped to standing here with a stranger who somehow felt more dangerous than everything that came before. I pushed myself off the wall slowly, my legs still unsteady, my fingers brushing against the cold brick as if I needed proof that I was still here, still real. He did not move away when I stepped forward. He did not move closer either. He just watched, that same controlled stillness, like he had all the time in the world and none of it mattered. "I can get home from here," I said, the words coming out more defensive than I intended, like I needed to reclaim something, even if it was just the illusion of control. His expression did not change. Not even a flicker. "No," he said. Just that. One word. Flat. Certain. I blinked, caught off guard by how immediate the answer was. "No," I repeated, a small edge creeping into my voice despite everything that had just happened. "It is 8 blocks. I walk it every day." His gaze shifted slightly, not away, just deeper, like he was measuring something I could not see. "You will not walk it tonight," he replied. There was no argument in his tone, no anger, just a statement that felt already decided. Something in my chest tightened again, that same instinctive resistance rising up, the part of me that refused to be told what to do, especially by someone I did not know. "I appreciate what you did," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice, forcing myself to meet his eyes. "But I do not need an escort." For a second, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, his head tilted, like I had said something mildly unexpected. Not wrong, just irrelevant. "This is not about what you need," he said quietly. The words landed heavier than they should have. I felt it, that shift again, like I had stepped into a conversation I did not understand the rules of. My pulse picked up, not from the alley this time, not from the men who had already disappeared, but from him. From the way he spoke like the outcome was already written. "Then what is it about?" I asked before I could stop myself. The question hung there between us, fragile and sharp at the same time. For the first time since he arrived, something changed in his expression. Not much, just a slight tightening around his eyes, a flicker of something that passed too quickly to name. "You were followed," he said. My stomach dropped. The words hit harder than anything else that had happened tonight. "I know," I replied, my voice quieter now, the earlier edge gone. "That is why I turned in here. A mistake. A stupid one." I did not say that part out loud, but it lingered anyway. He shook his head once, slow, deliberate. "No," he said again. "You were followed before that." Silence pressed in around us, heavier than before. I felt my thoughts scatter, trying to piece that together, trying to rewind the last 20 minutes, every turn, every step, every sound I had ignored. "That does not make sense," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I was not sure I believed them. He stepped closer then, not abruptly, not threatening, just enough to close the space between us so that his voice did not have to carry. "It does," he replied. I could see it now, clearer in the dim light. The precision in everything about him. The way nothing seemed accidental. The way he stood like he belonged exactly where he was, like this alley, this moment, had always been part of his path. "Who are you?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could filter it, before I could decide if I even wanted the answer. He looked at me for a long second, the rain tracing lines down his coat, the light catching in his eyes just enough to make them unreadable. Then he exhaled softly, like the question itself was not important. "Someone who is getting you out of here," he said. My breath caught again, not from fear this time, but from something else I could not quite define. Control. Certainty. The kind that did not ask for permission. He extended his hand slightly, not touching, not forcing, just offering a direction. "Come with me." And for reasons I could not explain, reasons that did not make sense even in my own head, I hesitated. Not because I did not trust him, but because a part of me already knew that if I took that step, nothing about tonight would stay simple ever again. I should have said no. That is what a normal person would have done. That is what every instinct I had built over 24 years should have told me to do. Do not follow strangers. Do not trust someone just because they helped you once. Do not step deeper into something you do not understand. But nothing about tonight had followed the rules I knew, and standing there in the rain, looking at him, I realized something that unsettled me even more than the alley had. He was not waiting for my answer because he already expected it. My fingers tightened at my sides, cold water dripping from my sleeves as I took a slow breath that did nothing to steady me. "I do not even know your name," I said, my voice quieter now, less defiant, more searching. It felt like the only ground I had left to stand on. His gaze did not shift. "Adrian," he said. Just that. No last name. No explanation. Like one word was enough. Adrian. The name settled somewhere in my chest in a way I did not like, in a way that felt too easy to remember. "Emily." I replied automatically, even though he had not asked, even though something told me he might already know. The corner of his mouth moved slightly, not quite a smile, but something close to recognition. That should have bothered me more than it did. The rain softened for a moment, or maybe I just stopped hearing it as loudly, my focus narrowing to the space between us. His hand was still there, not touching, not forcing, just present. An offer that did not feel optional. I hesitated 1 second longer. Then I stepped forward. I did not take his hand, but I closed the distance enough that the choice was made. Something in. His posture shifted, subtle but immediate, like a door had just been unlocked. He turned without another word, expecting me to follow. And I did. The alley felt different walking out than it had going in. Shorter, less endless. Or maybe I just knew now that I would make it out. We reached the main street in less than a minute, the glow of streetlights washing over us, the distant sound of traffic returning like the world had decided to exist again. A black car waited at the curb. I had not noticed it before. Of course I had not. It blended into everything and nothing at the same time, sleek, quiet, like it belonged to him in a way I could not explain. Adrian opened the passenger door, not looking at me as he did it, just moving with the same controlled precision I had started to notice in everything about him. "Get in," he said. Not harsh, not raised, just certain. I stopped beside the car, my reflection faint in the tinted window, rain streaking across the glass like lines I could not read. "Where are you taking me?" I asked, because I needed to ask, because I needed something to feel like a choice. He glanced at me then, really looked at me, and for a second the noise of the street seemed to fade again. "Somewhere safe," he said. The same words as before, but this time they carried weight. Not reassurance, not comfort, something deeper, something that made me realize safe, to him, might not mean the same thing it meant to me. I should have walked away. I could have. The street was right there. Light, people in the distance, a path back to everything normal. But normal had not followed me into that alley, and something told me it would not be waiting for me now either. My hand brushed against the edge of the car door, cold metal grounding me for half a second before I made the decision I would not be able to undo. I got in. The door closed behind me with a quiet, final sound that echoed louder than it should have in my chest. And as Adrian walked around to the driver's side, I realized I had just stepped out of my life as I knew it and into something I could not see the end of. The moment the door closed, the world outside disappeared. Not completely. I could still see the rain tracing lines across the window, still hear the distant hum of traffic, but it felt muted, like I had stepped into a different layer of reality where everything moved slower, quieter, more controlled. The interior of the car was warm, not overly so, just enough to make the cold on my skin suddenly noticeable, my soaked clothes clinging heavier now that the adrenaline had nowhere to go. I sat still, my hands resting in my lap, unsure where to look, unsure what to do with the space I had just entered. Adrian slid into the driver's seat a second later, the door closing with the same quiet certainty, sealing us into a silence that felt intentional. He did not start the car right away. He did not speak either. He adjusted the rearview mirror, a small, precise movement, then rested his hands on the wheel like he was considering something I could not see. I became aware of my breathing again, uneven, too fast, like my body had not caught up to the fact that I was no longer standing in that alley. I forced myself to inhale slowly, then exhale, my eyes dropping to the faint reflection of my hands against the dark leather seat. They were still shaking. I curled my fingers slightly, trying to hide it, even though there was no one here I needed to hide from. Or maybe there was. "You can relax," Adrian said finally, his voice low, steady, breaking the silence without disturbing it. I let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "That might take a minute," I replied, glancing at him before I could stop myself. He was watching me, not intensely, not in a way that felt invasive, just aware. Like nothing I did went unnoticed, even when he said nothing about it. He nodded once, like that answer made sense to him, then reached toward the center console. For a second, my body tensed automatically, reacting before my mind could catch up, a reflex I did not expect and did not want him to see. But his movement was simple. He opened a compartment and pulled out a folded cloth, clean, dry, and held it out toward me. I blinked, caught off guard again. "You are soaked," he said, as if that explained everything. I hesitated, then took it, the fabric warm from the car, grounding in a way I did not expect. "Thank you," I murmured, pressing it lightly against my hands, then my face, wiping away rain that had long since stopped feeling like just water. The small act made everything feel more real. Too real. He started the car then, the engine coming to life with a quiet hum that matched everything else about him. Smooth. Controlled. The car pulled away from the curb without hesitation, merging into the late-night street like it had always belonged there. I watched the city pass by through the window, lights stretching and bending in the rain, familiar streets starting to blur into something distant. "You said I was followed," I said after a moment, my voice steadier now, but still careful. "How do you know that?" He did not answer immediately. His eyes stayed on the road, his focus unbroken, like the question was something he was deciding how much to respond to rather than whether he would. "Because I saw them," he said finally. Simple. Direct. My chest tightened. "Before the alley?" I asked. He nodded once. "Yes." The words settled heavy between us. I swallowed, my mind racing back again, replaying everything with a new perspective that did not make it better, only sharper. "Why did you not say something sooner?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, driven by something between fear and frustration. This time, he did glance at me, briefly, just long enough for me to catch the shift in his expression. Not defensive, not guilty, just certain. "Because I needed to be sure," he said. The answer made something twist in my chest. Needed to be sure of what? Of them. Of me. Of whatever this situation actually was. I looked away, back to the window, the reflection staring back at me unfamiliar, like I was already someone else. The car turned onto a quieter street, the noise of the city fading again, replaced by something calmer, more isolated. I felt it before I saw it. The shift in direction. The change in where we were going. "This is not the way to my apartment," I said quietly. Adrian did not slow down. "No," he replied. "Just one word." And somehow, that single word told me everything I needed to know. I was not going home. Not tonight. The silence stretched longer than I expected after he said it. Not tonight. The words echoed in my head. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, like everything else about him. I stared out the window, watching the streets shift from familiar storefronts and late-night diners into something quieter, something more distant. The traffic thinned. The streetlights spaced out. The city, I knew, slowly gave way to something that felt just out of reach of it. "You cannot just decide that," I said finally, my voice calm but tight underneath. It was not fear this time. Not exactly. It was something sharper. The need to hold on to something that still belonged to me. Adrian did not react right away. He turned the wheel smoothly, The car gliding into another street lined with taller buildings, darker windows, fewer signs of life. I already did, he replied. Simple. Final. My jaw tightened. I turned toward him fully now, the warmth of the car no longer enough to keep the tension out of my chest. That is not how this works, I said, the words coming faster now, more certain than I felt. You do not get to decide where I go just because you helped me. He listened. That was the unsettling part. He did not interrupt. He did not dismiss it. He let me speak like it mattered, like it was being considered, even if I could not tell what that meant yet. When I finished, the silence returned, heavier this time, waiting. Then he spoke. If I leave you where you were going, he said, his eyes still on the road, his tone unchanged, they will find you again. My breath caught slightly. I hated that he was right. I hated that part of me already knew it. You do not know that, I replied, softer now, less certain. He shook his head once, almost imperceptibly. I do. The confidence in those two words was not arrogance. It was worse. It was certainty built on something real, something I was not part of. I looked away again, my reflection faint against the glass, rain distorting the edges of my face into something unfamiliar. So what? I said quietly. You just take me somewhere, and that is it. I stay there until you decide it is safe. The question felt too big the moment it left my mouth, too close to something I did not want to define. He slowed the car slightly as we approached a turn, the headlights cutting through the rain in long, clean lines. You stay somewhere they cannot reach you, he said. Not controlling, not possessive, just structured, like a solution that had already been mapped out. I let out a breath, leaning back against the seat, my fingers still wrapped loosely around the cloth he had given me. And you expect me to trust that? I asked. This time, he did glance at me, longer than before, enough that I felt it. Not pressure, not demand, just presence. No, he said. The answer surprised me more than anything else tonight. I expect you to understand the alternative. That landed harder than I wanted it to, because I did understand it. Too well. The car turned again, the streets narrowing further, the buildings rising taller, more private, more removed from everything else. The city noise faded until it was just the hum of the engine and the soft rhythm of rain. I realized then that I had stopped thinking about getting out, stopped calculating how I would leave, what I would say, where I would go next. Not because I trusted him, but because a part of me had already accepted something I had not said out loud. I did not have a better option. Where are we going? I asked again, quieter this time, less like a challenge, more like a question I needed answered. Adrian's gaze returned to the road ahead, the faint glow of something larger appearing in the distance, a building set back from the street, lights low, controlled, deliberate. Somewhere you can breathe, he said. And for the first time since I stepped into that alley, I realized I had not taken a full breath since. Not really. Not completely. The car slowed as we approached the entrance, the world outside shifting again, this time into something I did not recognize at all. And as the gates ahead began to open without him stopping, without him asking, I felt that same quiet certainty settle in my chest again. This was not temporary. This was not random. And whatever I had just stepped into, it had been waiting for me long before tonight. The gates did not make a sound as they opened. That was the first thing I noticed. No creak, no grind, just a smooth, silent movement like they had been expecting us, like they had been waiting. The car rolled forward without slowing, crossing the threshold into a space that felt completely removed from the city I had just left behind. I turned slightly in my seat, watching the gates close behind us through the rear window, the outside world disappearing inch by inch until it was nothing but darkness and rain again. My chest tightened, not from panic, but from the realization of how easily everything had just been cut off. No noise, no witnesses, no way to trace the exact moment I crossed into something else. The driveway stretched ahead, long and lined with low lights that cast a soft glow against the wet pavement, guiding us toward a structure that slowly came into view. It was not what I expected. Not flashy, not loud, just controlled. Clean lines, dark glass. The kind of place that did not need to prove anything because it already knew what it was. Adrian drove like he belonged here, like every turn had already been memorized, like this place answered to him without question. That thought settled deeper than I wanted it to. The car came to a stop near the entrance, the engine going quiet in a way that made the rain sound louder again. For a moment, Neither of us moved. I sat there, staring at the building, trying to process how far I had come in less than 30 minutes. How quickly my world had shifted from a familiar street to this. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice low, almost swallowed by the silence. Adrian unfastened his seatbelt with a soft click that seemed louder than it should have. "Somewhere secure," he said. The same tone, the same certainty. He stepped out before I could respond, the door closing behind him with that same quiet finality. I stayed where I was for a second longer, my hand resting on my lap, my fingers still curled around the cloth he had given me. I could feel the warmth fading from it now, replaced by the steady rhythm of my pulse. Then my door opened. He stood there, rain catching in his hair, his coat dark against the light behind him, his expression unchanged from the moment I first saw him in the alley. Controlled, patient, waiting, but not really. "Come on," he said. Not a command. Not soft either. Just enough. I stepped out, the cold air hitting me again, sharper now that I had gotten used to the warmth inside. The ground beneath my feet felt solid, real, but everything else felt slightly off, like I had stepped into a version of the world that ran on different rules. The entrance doors slid open before we even reached them. No hesitation. No delay. Inside, the air was still, warm, quiet in a way that made every small sound stand out. My footsteps. His footsteps. The faint echo of both against polished floors. I glanced around without meaning to, taking in the details I could not ignore. Minimal. Precise. Nothing out of place. No clutter. No signs of anything unnecessary. It did not feel like a home. It felt like control made physical. Adrian did not slow down, and I found myself matching his pace without thinking, following him deeper into the space, even as part of me questioned every step. "You can stay here tonight," he said, his voice carrying easily in the quiet. I stopped walking. The words caught me off guard, not because of what they meant, but because of how easily he said them, like it had always been the plan. "Just tonight?" I asked, turning toward him, needing clarity, needing something defined. He paused then, finally, looking at me fully. And for the first time since I met him, there was something in his expression that shifted just enough to notice. Not hesitation, not uncertainty, something else, something that made my stomach tighten. "We will see," he said. The answer was not what I wanted, not what I needed, but it was honest in a way that made it harder to argue with. I looked past him then, deeper into the space I had just entered, trying to imagine myself here, trying to understand how this could be temporary, how any of this could be simple. It did not feel temporary. It did not feel simple. It felt like a beginning, and I was already standing in the middle of it. I did not move. Right away after he said it. "We will see." The words lingered in the air between us, quiet but heavy, like they carried more meaning than he was willing to explain. I stood there, just inside the entrance, water still dripping faintly from the edges of my sleeves onto a floor that looked too perfect to belong to someone like me. For a second, I became painfully aware of every detail about myself. The worn fabric of my clothes, the damp weight of my hair, the way I did not belong in a place like this. Adrian did not comment on any of it. He turned slightly, gesturing toward a hallway that extended deeper into the building, his movements as precise as everything else about him. "There is a room prepared," he said. "Not you can choose. Not if you want. Just a fact, stated like it had already been decided before I ever stepped inside." I hesitated, my eyes drifting past him again, trying to take in more of the space, trying to understand what kind of place this really was. It was quiet in a way that did not feel empty. More like controlled silence. The kind that existed because nothing was allowed to disrupt it. "You prepared a room," I repeated slowly, the words catching on something in my mind that did not quite fit. "Before tonight." He looked at me then, fully, his expression unreadable but steady. "Yes." No explanation. No attempt to soften it. Just the truth, delivered without hesitation. A chill moved through me that had nothing to do with the rain. "So you were not just passing by," I said, my voice quieter now, more careful. It was not really a question, but I needed to hear what he would say anyway. He did not deny it. "No," he replied. The simplicity of that answer made everything feel sharper, clearer, and somehow more complicated all at once. My thoughts shifted, pieces falling into place in a way I did not like. The alley, the timing, the way he appeared exactly when everything reached its worst point. None of it felt random anymore. "You were watching," I said, the realization settling heavier with each word. Not accusing, just stating what was starting to make sense. Adrian did not move closer, did not step back. He stayed exactly where he was, like he had no reason to adjust. I was aware, he corrected, his tone calm, almost measured, like the difference mattered. I let out a slow breath, my heart picking up again, but not in the same frantic way as before. This was different. This was understanding something I had not seen clearly until now. That is not better, I murmured. For the first time, something almost like a shadow of expression crossed his face. Not guilt, not regret, just acknowledgement. It is honest, he said. And that, somehow, made it harder to push back. Because he was not pretending, not hiding behind excuses or half-answers. He was telling me exactly what he chose to tell me. Nothing more, nothing less. I looked down at the cloth still in my hand, now damp and wrinkled from being held too tightly, then back up at him. Why me? The question came out softer than I expected, stripped of the edge it might have had before, leaving only the part of me that needed to understand. The part that needed a reason for all of this. Adrian held my gaze for a long second, the silence stretching just enough to make the moment feel deliberate. Considered. Important. Because you were already in it, he said finally. The answer did not give me clarity. It gave me something else. A deeper sense that whatever had started tonight had roots that went further back than I could see. I swallowed, the weight of that settling in my chest, then glanced toward the hallway he had indicated earlier. A room prepared. A place already waiting. Nothing about this felt like coincidence anymore. And standing there, with the quiet pressing in and his presence steady beside me, I realized something I could not ignore. I had not just been saved tonight. I had been pulled into something. Something that had been moving long before I ever noticed it. And now that I was here, I was not sure there was a way to step back out.